Hello, it's Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians, and it is me, Cindy House. I am the host of this podcast, and thank you for listening. California-based Forrest Sun, raised by back-to-the-lander hippies who were deeply involved in art and music, Forrest channels healing through song. His latest album, Brighter Days, centers around the death of his father and then the end of his 10-year marriage. Forrest believes in the power of music and songwriting. In fact, it seems as though the songs demand to come out of him in this non-negotiable urge. During this interview, Forrest tells some epic family stories, but also gives a lot of insight into his family of origin and in turn giving us an idea of how he became the wonderful person he is today. Forrest and I met back in the early 2000s when I was in college, and he actually came on my college radio show at least once, maybe twice. We probably haven't seen each other in 15 years. We ran into each other earlier this year at Folk Alliance, which is a huge music conference this past year in 2020. It was taking place in New Orleans. And the way we so easily picked up as if no time had gone by reminded me of his, at least from my perspective, strong ability to connect with other people. I asked him about that during our interview, and I was surprised to hear that connecting with other people can be a real struggle for Forrest and is something that he has to intentionally work on. Regardless, I really enjoyed talking to Forrest and hearing about his early life, his thoughts on his name, and also his morning routine. Forrest is an inspiration to keep looking for the light in dark times. We're going to take a listen to his song from the album Brighter Day. This song actually opens the record. It's the latest album from Forrest Sun. We'll check out All This Freedom, and then we'll get to our conversation with Forrest Sun on Basic Folk.
What are you gonna do with all this freedom? What are you gonna do with all this freedom? These days are yours, your hands are free. Where you gonna go, who you gonna be? It's your time, it's your parade. What you gonna do, what you gonna say? There was a time you were in chains. Now just yourself remains. Look in my eyes, there's no need to explain. You'll never wear those chains again. What are you gonna do?
All right, Forrest Sun, we are now tech wizards. Are you ready to have an emotionally charged conversation about your life now?
Absolutely. There's nothing like 20 minutes of technical difficulties to put you in the mood. Yes, we're connected. It's rolling. It's happening. And yeah, thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you. Thank you for being on the podcast. I wanted to start by talking about your parents. They had a huge influence on you. Unfortunately, they have both passed away.
Yeah.
But their origin stories is very interesting. They were back to the Landers who raised you in upstate New York. Where did they originally come from? And also, what do you know about the Back to the Land movement and why they chose to be a part of it?
Well, my mom's originally from Boston, where we last saw each other. Oh, no, I guess we saw each other at Folk Alliance.
That's right, yeah.
And reconnected. But 15 years ago, we first met on the airwaves at Emerson.
Yep.
At 6 a.m. I remember it well. And that's where my mom grew up. And then she went to college in Antioch, which is in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And my dad grew up in Yellow Springs, Ohio, which is a tiny little liberal town, a little liberal arts college in the middle of Ohio. And they played folk music together. That's how they met. And they moved to upstate New York, bought a little piece of land, and got married up there. I was at the wedding in the belly. She was 9 months pregnant when they they got married, had a big hippie wedding outside on the land that they had bought, and my dad planted a garden, and they started building a house out of recycled materials from everywhere that they could find. And I spent the first 6 months of my life living in an orange tent while the house was being built. No running water, outhouse, real back to the land stuff. And where it came from, I mean, there was certainly a strong movement towards that in the early 70s. But I don't know if my dad was so much a product of that movement or if he was just born that way. I mean, all he ever wanted was a garden and a home and to play music and make art and have his own space to do that in. His life in his last years and his later years was very much that. He had his garden, and he would go to town once a week on Sundays. He could walk to downtown Yellow Springs and play at the same coffee shop every Sunday for 10 years for tips and free coffee. Actually, he didn't even know about the tips until I asked him once if he was playing for tips, and he said, "Oh, I could put a tip jar out." So that was big news to him because he didn't care about money. He did life without money. He had that sort of hippie perspective of why would you want to earn money? You just have to give it to the government. And in his last years, he had a big wizard beard, just down to his belly button, and
wow,
and a hat with always had a feather in it that he had found somewhere. And
was it the same feather or a different one?
I think it was the same feather, and I think it was an eagle feather that he had lived out on the reservation in Arizona, and had found that feather there. So
that's a big deal.
Yeah, it meant a lot to him, and he was there with his wife was teaching English, and then he went on to study Buddhism and acupuncture in Colorado and in Nepal, and then moved back to his hometown of Yellow Springs and have his garden, live in the house that he grew up in as a kid. And yeah, he just passed away about a year and a half ago now. And so I was really sad and sorry to see him go. I miss him a lot. He was a huge inspiration to me musically, as well as his philosophy on life. And he was the kind of guy you would ask him a question and he would take so long to answer that by the time he answered, I would have no idea what he was talking about because my mind would have moved on. Do
you mean that there
was
silence?
Yeah.
He wouldn't talk, and then finally get to it. There'd just be the silence.
There would just be silence. Yeah, no, he wouldn't. My mom was a nonstop chatterbox, but my dad was, there was a lot of silence and long pauses before answering, and he would give things some deep thought, though he would surprise me sometimes with some humor. And I miss him. And I miss my mom a lot too. She died in 2008 after fighting stage 4 lung cancer for 4 years. And we did a couple of benefit CDs that your listeners might enjoy. They're called Songs for Laura. My mom's name is Laura. And over 40 artists contributed their music to raise awareness and funds for people with cancer and their families. And lots of wonderful folks on there, on the Songs for Laura volumes 1 and 2.
I got a couple more questions about your parents, if that's okay. Specifically going back to your upbringing, and you were talking about being in the tent, spending the first 6 months living in a tent while your dad was building this house, which you don't have any memory of this time. But what did you hear about that time for what it was like for both parents?
I think they had really different experiences. And my parents divorced when I was 2. So I think it was really hard on my mom. She's a really social person. My dad was not. He was really happy with nature as his companion, animals, walks in the woods. And he likes people, but I think in a lot smaller doses. And I think my mom found it really hard to be up there with no running water and no electricity and no people around and a new baby. And, they were both young. I mean, she was 23 when I was born. So I can imagine myself in both of their shoes at that time, having it be just a very different experience for both of them.
And also your parents have a pretty epic history with music legends. Your dad chopping wood with Garth Hudson of the band, being roommates with Maria and Jeff Muldaur. Your mom watching Pete Seeger and Joan Baez play in her uncle's living room, dating a Chambers brother. And those are just a handful of stories that I imagine that were being told around you. How are these stories presented to you? And then how did you receive them as a kid? And what was the evolution of your realizing how unique your parents' history actually was?
Yeah, a lot of those stories I didn't get to hear until recently. It was just a few years ago when I really started digging deep with my dad and getting him to talk about things. Because, as I said, he didn't talk a lot. And so he had all these amazing experiences that nobody really knew about. He was not one to talk about those things. But every once in a while, if I'd bring something up, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I remember that guy," that he knew, Jeff Muldaur personally. And he said I was a pretty good picker, or talking about the band and chopping wood with Garth Hudson. And I love when I found out just a few years ago that he literally laid the floor that Dylan stood on in Woodstock at Albert Grossman's studio. So, he put down the wood floor in the studio. And then his story about meeting Dylan was he didn't get to meet Dylan. Maria and Jeff Muldaur invited him there was a party out at Grossman's and Dylan was going to be there. And my dad was already growing his own food at this point. And he was growing his own beans and had made a pot of his own beans and had the most horrendous case of flatulence from his newly grown beans, and so he declined to go to the party.
Oh,
and so he missed meeting Dylan. But that's my dad.
Oh my God.
In a nutshell there.
So I actually had heard that story. That's why my reaction was like so measured, because it's like a hilarious story.
Yes.
What was it like when he told that story? Like, was he like laughing his face off when he was telling you that story, or was it like very like, well, here's what happened?
Yeah, he would get a little grin, he'd get a grin. And he had lost a bunch of teeth at the end, so he had this toothless grin that was was really great. When he would get him to flash it, he had a wonderful laugh. And my mom, on the other hand, talked a lot, so I heard a lot of her stories growing up. And that one about her seeing Pete Seeger filming this TV show in her my great uncle's living room, which I've actually seen. There's video footage of it out there, which is awesome. And Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee were there, and Joan Baez. And so that was a huge influence on her at age 17, wanting to learn to play. Mm. And of course, she would go to Passim and all that sort of stuff. And
when it was a Club 47?
There. Exactly,
That's
back
cool.
in the day. But I like the sort of full circleness of being on a Putumayo compilation a few years ago now. And there was lots of great folks on there. Jeffrey Foucault was on there, but Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee were on there. And it was after my mom had already passed, but I think she would have really got a kick out of that to see me on that Putumayo compilation with the Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, who she'd met when she was 17.
That's so cool. It's like, who else do you need to meet at that point in order to inspire you to start making music, or at least have it in your life in a huge way?
Or imagine having a whole living room just full of inspiring musicians at that age.
That's amazing.
Yeah, very cool.
I wanted to talk about the influence of each of your parents on you specifically, like in reading about your mom, Laura Fleischman.
Yeah.
She was a dancer. She loved art. She was a poet, was fascinated with the bohemian world of the 1920s, was a Native American rights advocate. How did that all translate into your connection with her?
It's an interesting question. Growing up with her, all that was my life. And I didn't realize maybe how different it is from the way other people had grown up. In high school, she was manager for Dennis Banks, who was one of the leaders of the American Indian movement. And she was a manager for Rodney Grant, who's a Native American actor. You may remember Wind in His Hair from Dances with Wolves. Did you ever see Dances with Wolves with Kevin Costner?
That's on my list. It's in my queue.
Oh, you got to see it. So you'll look for Rodney Grant as Wind in His Hair. He's got a great role. And so my house was just always full of people coming and going and staying over. And, I was a teenager, so mostly I was trying to get out of the house. But looking back on it, I met some really great people, a lot of whom are gone now, but that I feel really privileged to have known and had in my home. And we spent every summer at a place called the Omega Institute where she worked, which is in upstate New York. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's like a summer camp where they have classes in everything you can imagine. If you go into a New Age section of a bookstore, all those teachers come through and teach. But then they also had an arts week with Babatunde Olatunji and Bobby McFerrin and wonderful folks like that would come through and play and sing. And that was a wonderful place to spend summers. I got exposed to a lot. I miss it. I haven't been back in years. It's still going on. I did go back and teach a class there called Express Yourself for Teens, where I got everybody singing and making art, which is my other hat. When I'm not making music, I like to paint, and that's what I studied in school, at UC Santa Cruz and in Barcelona. So, did I answer your question there? I rambled for a bit.
Yeah, I feel like from my perspective, reading about what your mom was interested in versus like what your dad was interested in, like she seems like she maybe instilled a love of the beauty of art in you.
Yeah.
Just an assumption.
No, that's very insightful. I would say yes. She always thought of herself as an artist, though she did play folk music and sing. And she ran her own business designing and selling jewelry for many years, and then importing artifacts from all over the world that she would sell at the store at Omega. And she had a lot of anxiety, so she had to overcome her fear of flying in order to go anywhere. She was afraid to get in elevators, but she would do it. She would do it despite her fears. And she had a full life till the end, and it was pretty brutal to see her have to fight so hard to stay alive because she didn't want to go. So some people get ill and they're gone in a few weeks, a few months, maybe a year, and she fought on for 4.5 years, emaciated and struggling and in pain, and just saying, "I don't want to die." So, what
was your relationship like with her towards the end of her life?
It was intense at that time to watch her go through all that. And she was a very social person, and so she would come to life. Like I threw some concerts, benefit concerts with the Songs for Laura CDs when they came out. She would get all dressed up and put on makeup, and even though she hadn't gotten out of bed in months, and would go to these events and really come to life with the music because she loved the music and she loved seeing people. And so we had wonderful concerts in Santa Fe while she was still alive, and then after she passed away, we did some memorial concerts at one at the Cactus Cafe down in Austin, Texas, with a bunch of Texas songwriters, and did one in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and one out here in Mill Valley, California, where I live.
Your relationship with your dad, when it comes to like thinking about your mom was this poet, artist, dancer. Your dad had a lot of like practical skills he was displaying around you, like gardening, carpentry, building a house, farming.
Yeah.
What was that relationship like?
He had old trucks that he used to
mechanic.
keep working. He was a mechanic as well. Yeah. I once, drove across country with him in a 54 Chevy from Santa Fe to Vermont. My relationship with him in regards to those things, in retrospect, I wish I had paid more attention and learned more of that stuff from him. But I was often, since my parents weren't together, I would be with my mom during the school year and see him in the summers. And I was off playing with my friends. I wasn't like, "Hey, Dad, teach me mechanics. Teach me how to do it." But in retrospect, I wish I had learned carpentry from him, because I've talked to many folks at his memorial last year in Yellow Springs who, told me, "Oh yeah, your dad built my kitchen, or he put in these cupboards, or, and he always did everything so carefully and so beautifully, and just took his time and made sure it was done right." That is the way he was, though he was very much an artist too, I would have to say, because he was interested in ceramics. He would sculpt these otherworldly creatures, these elves and dragons, and he also painted and would show his paintings. And then he also played music, and he got into slide guitar in the end. He would play like some lap steel, cover some of my songs, which I really enjoyed.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, but I feel, to answer your question more directly, I feel like I missed an opportunity to have spent more time with him and learned more from him in that regard, as a carpenter, as a mechanic, as a farmer, as a gardener. Though I am a gardener now, and so I feel like I inherited some of that, but there's, I'm sure there's more I could have learned from him.
I feel like when I was a kid growing up, like my dad had some, skills, just around the house, like fixing things up. But I didn't know about it until I bought a house. And then he came out and he was helping me with all this stuff. I'm like, how do you know how to do this? It's like a mystery. It's a secret. Yeah. That's amazing what our attention does, right? I mean, whatever we're interested in is what we learn. And I find that changes with time, what we're interested in. Yeah.
And I suppose that's a good thing, keeps things interesting, or maybe that's how we accrue wisdom. I think the setup is, for most people, by the time we reach towards the end of our lives, I think we finally get our values straight and we start paying attention to what's really important when we don't have as much time left to enjoy it. So I aspire to pay attention sooner rather than later.
Can we talk about your name?
Yes.
Yeah, so your stage name is Forrest Son, but you grew up with your dad's last name, and we should say David Schumacher is your dad?
Yeah, so my full name is Forrest Son Schumacher, but nobody knows that except the IRS and all your listeners now.
Now we all know it.
Now everybody knows, but yeah, it's on my birth certificate. Forrest Son is my first and middle name.
So Forrest and Forrest Son is like such a hippie name, and like Forrest as a first name is not too common. And I was wondering,
yeah, there's some generations in the South that an older generation of Forrest with 2 R's, like Forrest Gump.
And you just have one.
You know, that spelling. I just have 1 R, yeah.
What was it like for you to be a kid named Forrest? How did you feel about your name growing up, and how do you feel about it now?
Now I love it. I feel like I've really grown into it and embrace it. And I mean, I feel like my dad named me and my mom really aptly, in that I feel completely, if I need to fill my well, if I feel depleted in any way and I need to come back to myself in some way, a walk in the woods always does that for me. And there is something about the light shining through the trees that brings me back to myself and my sense of who I am. And so in that sense, I feel like it was a gift. It was a boon, because it's like, how many times have I heard those words in my life that they're just kind of calling that feeling to me every time I hear my name. So it's a reminder of who I am, which I think a name should be, since that's the thing we hear the most in our lives, probably. I mean, certainly that's something that we pay the most attention to. Though I don't have kids, I have 2 little nieces, so maybe my brother would disagree about, you know, when your kids are saying your name over and over again, or call it mom, dad. But as a kid, as you may have guessed, it was different. It was really different. I mean, I got called shrub, twig, underbrush, you know, leaf, anything. Hunter, for some reason. People often confuse the name Forrest and Hunter. I don't know why. And then Forrest Gump came out, and there was plenty of teasing around all that. I was actually studying art in Barcelona when that movie came out, and a little homesick. So I really enjoyed just seeing America on the screen and hearing American accents. And because the year I was studying art in Barcelona, I immersed myself totally and on purpose, not speaking any English for the whole year and just only spending time with Spanish or Catalan speakers there, because I really wanted to learn the language, which I did. But I did go to the movie theater and see that film. And so people used to tease me about it in Spain, Forrest Gump, with a Spanish accent as they would. But there was a time when I wished for a normal name very much. But that's not now. Now I'm glad to be Forrest Son.
Now, as an adult, you have like a really great ability to connect with people. You cultivate an immediate connection, which I know from like personal experience of knowing you for so long. We hadn't seen each other for 10, 15 years. And, you know, you showed up at Folk Alliance and we talked to each other for like 2 minutes. And I was like, oh my God, there's Forrest. And just like, it was like a day hadn't gone by since we had seen each other. But what was it like growing up? How did you relate to other kids, adults, and how did you learn to connect with people?
It's actually a real challenge for me, connecting with people, and something that I work at. So it's really nice to hear you say that. Because the people assume because if you are on stage that you're an extrovert. Being on stage actually is not an extroverted activity. I feel like I'm inviting people into my world, you know, rather than. So as an artist, that's part of how it happens, I think. But I do, and especially lately, like many of us, get a lot of alone time these days, and it really makes me look forward to events like this, doing the podcast with you, and a chance to connect and talk. But I suppose I have both my dad's silence and my mom's chattiness at the same time, and the chattiness can come out when it's needed. but I think I know I have a deep love for people. I mean, I just feel like we're all one essentially, and it's to have a chance to see this unique expression of infinite energies or consciousness or divinity or whatever you want to call it expressed in another human being so uniquely is really phenomenal.
I want to talk about when you went to college in Santa Cruz at UCSC. Can you talk about moving to California? Were you in New Mexico at the time, living in New Mexico, and then went to California?
Yeah, I went to high school in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Yeah, and then visited a couple schools out here in California. Loved the Redwoods at UC Santa Cruz. Fell in love with the Redwoods and with that campus up on the hill overlooking the ocean. That's a pretty magical time in life to be striking out on your own for the first time, but in this really culturally accepted and safe sort of way of college, of the university experience. And Santa Cruz was very cool. Just I rode my bike everywhere, so I didn't have a car, and there's that huge hill, so my thighs got enormous. But I tried surfing for the first time. That was really fun. It was actually an extracurricular activity at Santa Cruz.
Of course.
And I was playing music and started studying art, and that's what I ended up getting my degree in with a year abroad in Barcelona. But and I was playing in a band called Super Sauce with Maya Rudolph, who later went on to be in Saturday Night Live and have an acting career, and is a wonderful singer and just as hilarious in person as you would imagine. And that was fun. And the crowning gig before I left to Barcelona to study art was we opened for No Doubt at the Catalyst. And I had actually met Gwen Stefani in high school at a show, and we all took her and the rest of the band skinny dipping at the Reservoir in Santa Fe. So it was fun to see her again. And though she didn't go skinny dipping, I should say, the rest of the band did, but I was disappointed she didn't join us. She stood on the shore, but she came to the Reservoir. So I was playing congas and rapping in that band, as was.
I cannot picture it.
Yeah, it's wild because a lot of the music that I really love that has come full circle to me is music that I heard as a kid in the early 70s, and something about those early years really stuck in terms of music that just feels right to me to make. But, at age 18, 19 at UC Santa Cruz, I was listening to Tribe Called Quest and hip hop, and that's what was going on and what I was into. I was learning to play the drums and piano, and I was studying West African drumming and playing for all the dance classes. It was a good time. I think I like learning, and I miss that aspect of university sometimes of just, well, what else am I going to learn? What else would I like to learn? What else can I study?
You found yourself in San Francisco. Did you live there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I moved to San Francisco. So I did a year abroad in Spain, and then I came back to Santa Fe, New Mexico for a year. Mm-hmm. And I was doing a lot of art and playing a lot of music there. But then I moved to San Francisco, and it was a really hard time to move to San Francisco, much like now. There was 0% housing availability. Oof. And so I was living on a friend's couch for months while I was going to interviews every day. Just there would be 30 people lined up to interview for a room that was just the dining room with a curtain in front of it. But eventually I found a great place with some great roommates. Just somehow it was easy. I just walked in and we'd just hang out and chat, and they said, okay, you want to move in? That was it after all this months of struggling. And this was before Craigslist. So on Upper Haight Street, you used to have to go down to this, I can't remember what it was called, but there was a space, and they would have printouts of all the stuff on the walls, and you would have to call people on the phone and make an appointment and go and see. And so I lived on Upper Haight, and then I moved to the foggy Richmond district in San Francisco on 3rd and Clement Street. I didn't like the fog. and my room and my window opened up onto like a wind tunnel, and just 3 feet away was the gray wall of the next house. I was pretty low. I was pretty depressed. The place was kind of moldy. So I painted a sun on a piece of cardboard, and I nailed it to the house next door so that when I woke up,
you'd see the sun.
Look out, I would see the sun shining. And that's where Painted Sun Records, which is my record label, got its name.
Now you live in Mill Valley, which I've actually been to Mill Valley And I'd love for you to just, if people haven't been, to just describe what this town is like that you live in.
Yeah, I feel really lucky to be here. Again, it's the redwoods that really called to me, and where I feel very much a kinship and at home with those trees. But it's also the city's not, it's 20 minutes away, and then the ocean is just over the hill as well. And when it gets really hot, the fog rolls in, so we get this nice breeze, but the sun will be shining, but there'll be a cool breeze coming off the sea. So I feel really lucky to be here. It's been a big part of my life at this point. I didn't expect to be here this long. I looked into moving other places, and in fact, moved everything to Romania, to Transylvania, at one point, and lived there for a while. But came back here, and there's a lot of musical roots in this town too. The Grateful Dead are around here in Marin County, and Bonnie Raitt's out here. Maria Muldaur, my dad's friend from back in the day, is here in Mill Valley.
What's the music venue called that everyone plays at?
The Sweetwater, you're probably thinking of. The Sweetwater, yeah. So I had all my first CD release parties at the Sweetwater, which is wonderful. There was the old Sweetwater where I saw Taj Mahal and Elvis Costello and all kinds of J.J. Cale. Wonderful people would play there, and I really wanted to play there, and I would walk down and meet the owners in person, and gave them my first CD. It was before, my first CD. I would do it daily for weeks and months until they finally gave me a chance to play, and that was just a wonderful place to play. And then so that building's been sold. It's been bought. There's a new one that is owned by Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead, the Sweetwater, which is also a wonderful space. I played there as part of the Mill Valley Film Festival a little while back, and was scheduled to play there a few months ago, but of course that's all been canceled.
Here's a quote from you to you. You say, "The unavoidable creative urge comes first when it comes to creating music. The DIY part is about finding a way to allow that creative expression to come to life and reach people. The art demands to be made, and I have to find a way." Can you speak more to that urge and demand from art? Kind of sounds pretty rude.
Yeah, it's not very glamorous, is it? It's not a lofty thing in any way for me at that sort of visceral gut level when songs are demanding to be written. There's other metaphors I could use, but they're even worse. It's sort of it's a release, right? It's a purging. There's a gathering of energies, of feelings, of emotions that need to be expressed in me in some way, and music helps me do that, and art helps me do that in a different way, putting color on the canvas. I just, after it's done, I feel reborn. I feel totally emancipated from that yoke of what was holding me down.
So your latest album is Brighter Day, released in 2019, and a lot of the themes are dealing with the loss of your father and the end of your marriage. And you said the close timing of these two major losses brought the awareness of the temporary nature of our lives home in a very real and heartbreaking way. And I wanted to talk about the spiritual connection that was in your life growing up that may have assisted overcoming great loss within your family, and within your father's family too. Like, seems as though he studied Buddhism, Aikido, Tai Chi, and he had a lot of loss when he was younger. 3 siblings, and his father all died before he was 12. And in thinking about the themes on Brighter Day, it's just overcoming so much. Can you talk about what your parents instilled in you in terms of overcoming great loss, and how spirituality played into their example, and maybe how you channeled it when creating this latest album?
Yeah. Well, I would say maybe it's the other way around. I feel like the great loss opened up a sense of the spiritual stronger, in that it really, I don't think I'd really known that kind of suffering before in my life. I've had a pretty privileged life. And despite dealing with anxiety or depression at various times in my life, they weren't founded in any particular external aspect of my life.
Trauma.
Yeah, just early experiences and inherited experiences. I think a lot of it, but having this heartbreak really made me realize that we all go through this. Most people, being born is not easy. I mean, right from the get-go, right? Our initial experience coming into the world is really difficult for both the mother giving birth and the baby being born. And then there's difficulties all the way along. And then, my dad was really into Buddhism, and increasingly I find myself drawn to that and interested in that. One thing that the Buddha said is misinterpreted of saying all life is suffering. And what he actually said was the unenlightened life is suffering. And it is amazing to me that shifting our perspective on things can change. And it sounds cliche, it sounds obvious. But one of the things that the Buddha said that has really just stuck with me and fascinated me is that, and I'm paraphrasing, it was thousands of years ago, so joy is not something that we get from life, that it is something we bring to life.
That's good.
So my hope for making music and making art is that, if it was only of solace and a comfort to me, it's already useful. But I feel really blessed and lucky that we're in this together, and that the personal is also the universal. And I feel like a good song and good art communicates that. And I feel really lucky to hear from people that my music has been there for them, and my artwork. All in the same week. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from somebody whose dad had just passed away in his 90s, and they were listening to my music when he passed, and they were going to have it play at his memorial. Wow. And I had played a house concert at their home in Cincinnati, Ohio, and so I had met some of them, but I got that call, and then I heard from another woman the same week that her mom had just passed away, and she had these great memories of the last memories of her mom, of sitting in the car together, and her mom had Alzheimer's at the end, so she didn't remember who she was, but she could put on my music and talk to her about the music, and that would keep her present, and they could still hang out and talk together. And so she was sitting in the car while it was Father's Day, and her dad was out taking a boat ride, and they were sitting in Sausalito while she gave her dad a break from taking care of her mom and listened to my music. And I'm so grateful for these kind of stories from people, because it's very abstract and sometimes, to make music and put it out there, but the personal stories really bring it home that this has some value for people, and I really appreciate that. And the same week, I got a call from somebody I had played their wedding the week before, and they were just sending a photo of me playing for their first dance. And I've heard from people who have made birth playlists with my music on it. So beings are being born while listening to this music. So I treasure those stories and invite anybody who's listening, if they have those kind of stories, to share with me. Or I love hearing from people.
In thinking about reflecting back now in like a practical sense, like during that time writing those songs, how did the process of writing help you heal? Like, was it immediate? Was it scary to approach these dark feelings? Did you write a bunch of dark songs that you didn't use, like Bob Dylan?
Some of the dark and the light is always all mixed together in there. And in order to have hope, things have to be really bad right now. So it's they're always mixed together in a painting, I guess, in a swath of colors. But it's a slow process, healing, grieving, and music helps. But time, it's a cliche, but there I can say, as time moves the feelings through, my heart hurts a little bit less, when it comes up. I'm grateful for that. Yeah. In order to feel that loss so deeply, it means I have loved that deeply. And otherwise,
but at the time, you're like, screw that.
Yeah, this is rough.
This is bullshit. only until, really rough. For me, it's like only until it's like you're reflecting back and you'd be like, well, I'm just like, no, it's bullshit. I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like certain cliche sayings that you're like, I can't deal with this right now. I'll have to come back to that. Put a pin in that and come back to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, there's a line, I'm here, I am saying the cliches, but at the time I was very much feeling like you're talking about. And there's this line in a song that's on this Brighter Day album. They say that time can heal all wounds, but sometimes it's time that does the wounding. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to feel all this, isn't it?
Yeah.
And losing someone you love, the end of a marriage, death of a loved one, it just brings that intensity like nothing I'd ever experienced before.
I read a little bit about your morning routine, and I don't know if you do it every day, but yoga, meditation.
You've really done some digging here. This
That's
is great.
Right. Can you talk a little bit more about your morning routine? Because it sounds dreamy, and how the way that you start your day affects you.
Well, I have a tendency, I think we all do to some extent, to repeat myself. Life is very repetitious, Here it is another day. The sun goes down, the sun comes up. We brush our teeth, we go to sleep, we do the things that we do over and over again. So it seems pretty obvious that we should choose wisely what we do over and over again, because that's what we're watering. That's what we're tending to in the garden of our self. For me, meditation and daily exercise to start the day, it always makes me feel good. I never regret it. Ever feel like, gosh, I wish I hadn't meditated, or I wish I didn't do that yoga, or I wish I hadn't taken the time for that today, or I wish I hadn't gone for a walk. And there's plenty of other choices I've made that I've regretted. That I feel like that was really just not the best best use of my time just now. And we're bombarded these days with things that grab our attention. And I feel like our attention is our precious resource. It's like that's our life force, that's our energy, that's what creates what our life is like, is where we put our attention. So for me, yes, starting and ending to the day with meditation is really, really key. And I'm grateful for that practice. And also, it's an amazing time we live in, where these techniques and this information that was guarded in the caves of the Himalayas for thousands of years is now on YouTube, or podcasts, or available. And it's just, there's so much information available to us, and these screens that can go into any possible universe that we want every time we open it up. Any music that has ever been made, we can hear it. Any books that have ever been written, it's all right here. And there's also a plethora of just junk that we can fill our minds with and our time with. And, sometimes it's fun to have a little junk food and just be like, yeah, this is great. But generally, I just don't feel good afterwards. And I feel the same way with food as I do about what I put in my awareness, in my mind, where I put my attention. So yes, yoga and meditation are something I was exposed to as a kid, and it was part of my high school time and my college time. Grateful for that. I did yoga 5 days a week, twice a day at UC Santa Cruz. So I was not the typical fraternity kid, I guess.
You were not in a fraternity.
I never was.
I was going to be like, hold the phone.
That's what I'm saying.
Wait a second. Everything I know is wrong.
No, I don't think. Yes, that's right. No, I mean, I think I have just, in very selfish of me perhaps, but I like feeling good. I would rather feel good than bad. And so the things that make me feel good, it ceases to be about discipline for me when I know, gosh, I'll just feel better if I do this. Because I don't wake up fresh. I'm not one of those, yay, let's greet the day. When I wake up, I'm like, whoa, here we are again, another day in a body on this planet that is overwhelming in many ways and changing all the time. And
I feel like in the morning is when I feel like my body is the most stupid. Like I was talking to somebody today, and I'm like, bodies are stupid. Like, why doesn't it just like do what I want it to do? And and like,
what do you want it to do?
To not feel like terrible,
Right. So this is it. This is the key. I mean, this is what works for me anyway. What I discovered is I wake up, I feel terrible. I think, God, I wish I didn't feel terrible. And then I meditate and I do yoga, exercise, and I don't feel terrible anymore. So it's pretty consistent in that sense.
I'm holding out for the childhood dream where it's like you just have to do it one time in your life and then you never have to do it again.
Right. The one big fix, the eternal fix.
It doesn't work that way.
I'm so far apparently not. I mean, like even heroin addicts, right? They have that first experience where they feel amazing, and then it's never as good as that, but they try to do it forever anyway. I don't think there's one big fix out there, and maybe that's the point is learning to have that. I guess it's willpower, a certain amount of willpower, where you're actively acknowledging I have a choice what I'm going to do today, and how do I want to use my energy, my attention, my time.
All right, we're going to do something that you're going to love. It's called the lightning round. I'm going to ask you questions about yourself, but these are not as deep.
Okay.
All right, here we go. First song you learned on the guitar.
First song. Oh, Freight Train, Elizabeth Cotton.
Oh my God, of course it was. What is your karaoke song? Freight Train, Elizabeth Cotton.
No. Karaoke. The only time I have successfully done karaoke and enjoyed it was singing Blue Christmas by Elvis Presley.
What is the first album you bought with your own money?
Oh, boy. Men at Work, Business as Usual.
The 80s.
It was a rough time, musically, I have to say. It was a rough time. There's many people who are huge fans of the 80s, but I get weird feelings when I listen to it. Maybe it was just memories of my pubescent age, but come from a land down under.
What was your first concert?
First big concert was the Grateful Dead at Madison Square Garden, followed by U2, the Joshua Tree.
The 80s.
At Madison Square Garden. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. But earlier memories of that, of concerts, were of friends' bands in Woodstock, New York. My mom would bring me and leave me under the table, and whoever was playing, and of kirtan singing, which is was going on in the communities that I was living in.
What is that?
Kirtan singing is a devotional singing that probably you've heard of Krishna Das. No Krishna Das. He's probably the most well-known purveyor of singing these songs that are ancient songs from India that are sung in a devotional style, call and response style.
That sounds like some kind of back to the land.
That was some hippie stuff for sure.
Last book you read?
I have been on a binge of Terry Pratchett. Are you familiar with Terry Pratchett? Yeah, the Discworld series. It's very British, dry sense of humor.
Have you read Good Omens?
Yes. Yeah, I enjoyed that. And they made a Netflix series of it as well. That was good.
Cool. I haven't watched the series yet. That's the book that I've read the most.
Yeah, he wrote that one with Neil Gaiman, who I also enjoy as an author.
Nice. Flying or invisibility?
Oh, wow, that's tough. I think flying. Yeah, I mean, invisibility is easy. I think most people are so in their own worlds already, they don't even notice you. But if you could fly, if I could fly, I would like that.
You like it?
Yeah.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars was actually the very first film I ever saw in the theater. And I remember the talk, saying, this is a movie, this is what a movie is, it's not real life, and you go in there. And so I remember the whole thing. I was really young. I must have been like 4 years old or so.
That's so cool.
And so definitely have an affinity for Star Wars. And, here in Marin County, we have Lucasfilm right here. And I've been out there for events and to see, saw the latest Star Wars out there and everything. So it's pretty amazing to see just this world that was created from imagination.
All right, last question. Make it count. Where's the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
Oh, I love Mill Valley, I have to say. Mill Valley, I've been all over the world. I love coming home to Mill Valley. This is just a wonderful place to be. So, a second would be Lugano, Switzerland, where I spent a summer working on a film and swimming in the lake every day. And
that sounds
just to
nice.
be able to swim in a lake every single day was amazing.
Wow.
I love that.
That's it. That's the lightning round.
That was fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for doing the lightning round, and thanks for talking to me today. Great to see you.
Truly a pleasure. Thanks so much for doing what you do, for your love of great music and everything you do to bring it to people, and for your insightful questions. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Basic Folk is produced by Laura McCarthy and Adam Corey, with Laura in the producer's chair this week. Lindsay Myers is our business manager and mother-to-be. Congratulations to Lindsay and Sarah. Alex Stanton of the Pittsburgh band Townspeople, who actually just welcomed a new baby into the world. Congratulations, Alex and Danielle. Alex does our music on Basic Folk. I'm your host, Cindy Howes, and Basic Folk is very proud to be part of the American Songwriter Podcast Network. You can listen to all 83 episodes of Basic Folk at my website, cindyhowes.net, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It'd be so great. Thumbs up. Love it. Okay, we'll talk to you next time. Bye.